Hello everyone, and welcome back to the New Book Review. Each week we'll be taking a look at some of the new books coming into the Prince George Public Library. This week we'll be taking a look at some of the titles coming into the adult collection. And without any further ado, let's look at some books.
Desert Notebooks by Ben Ehrenreich. Hello, I'm Luke, and I have a new book review for you. This is a non-fiction book, and it is a great way to finish off what has been a historically challenging year for everybody. So this book is called Desert Notebooks by Ben Ehrenreich. And I'm showing it to you on Hoopla, which is one of our online platforms. We do have a circulating copy of the actual book itself. I listened to it on Hoopla. It was a pretty good audiobook. It's a bit of a challenging book to describe in that it's really the author's musings about how close we as a society and a global community are to apocalypse. And he wrote this before the current pandemic started, so it is hits a little close to home these days. But what I will say about it is it's ultimately hopeful as well. So he talks about how in the past, during the Cold War, we were close to nuclear fallout and the impacts it had on society, and how society ultimately kind of was able to move past the existential threat of global annihilation. And now we're kind of experiencing our own existential threat with environmental collapse and chaotic world leaders, and now the global pandemic. But what Ehrenreich does is he looks at mythologies from cultures throughout the planet, all of which usually have a creation story, but also some sort of destruction story. And so what can we learn from, for instance, Ragnarok from the Norse, and from the indigenous people of Guatemala, from their stories? What can that tell us about how we as humans contextualize our own mortality? It's pretty interesting, and all the while, the name Desert Notebooks, he's sharing his musings from Joshua Tree in California, as well as Las Vegas, and finding beauty in these seemingly desolate places. Again, it's kind of a physical metaphor for, I think, the overall theme of the book is finding hope, finding meaning in what may seem insurmountable and hopeless. And so I highly recommend the Desert Notebooks. Again, it's the perfect punctuation to 2020, in my opinion. And thank you for tuning in.
Today I'll be talking about Cyber Shogun Revolution by Peter Tarias. Cyber Shogun Revolution is an alternate history novel that takes place in a version of the United States where Japan and Germany won World War II. The story follows mech pilot Raiko and secret police officer Bishop as they try to uncover a plot to overthrow the government of the United States of Japan and find the revolutionary known as the Bloody Mary. Peter Tarias continues the fast-paced mech combat of the previous novels while introducing more futuristic technology and exploring the darker side of social media. This book has a quick-moving story full of action and intrigue. Cyber Shogun Revolution has a 4.1 star rating on Goodreads and a 4.6 star rating on Amazon.ca. The general consensus of the reviews is that this is a fun, light read whose story keeps you questioning what's going on right until the very end. A few of the reviewers found that the story was difficult to follow, but I think this is because of the fast pace that makes it easy to miss important details. I read all 3 books in the series in quick succession and found each of them more difficult to put down than the last. This one nicely blends the mystery of a detective novel with that fast-paced action of mech combat. I would recommend this book to anyone who's a fan of science fiction, manga, or alternative history stories.
Today I'm going to talk about Mad with Joy by Joris Vermassen. Mad with Joy is a Belgian graphic novel that has recently been translated into English. Mad with Joy has won the Cutting Edge Award for Best Belgian Graphic Novel, and it was nominated and shortlisted of the 25 best Belgian comics of all time. Mad with Joy centers around Tom, an aspiring stand-up comedian, and his sister Ellen. Tom and Ellen have always been close, and Ellen is Tom's biggest supporter of his dreams and his career. And while they share a very similar sense of humor, Ellen has actually always been more passionate about visual art and art history. Here's the bad news. Ellen has pancreatic cancer and is terminally ill. And while Tom manages to visit her in the hospital every day, he struggles to maintain healthy relationships with the other aspects and people in his life. To be honest, Tom does not start off well for me. His humor and his behavior is off-putting, and he appears childish and selfish. Ellen's unwavering support of him, despite these flaws, was actually kind of off-putting for me as well. I thought, how could she support somebody behaving like this? However, the further I read, the more I began to understand that each of these people were desperate to cling to life, and the best part of their lives were each other. Also, all the other people around them in their life were behaving like responsible adults, so maybe Tom and Ellen didn't have to. I also started to recognize choices and behavior from my own experience with terminal illness in a loved one. And it reminded me that we don't always get to choose who we are when grief takes hold of us. We don't always have the luxury to choose to be a good person, and sometimes we just need to survive. Tom does his best to improve Ellen's circumstances, including removing her from the hospital and taking her to visit her favorite sculpture in a park, which is a dancer, and the title of the sculpture is Mad with Joy. He is discouraged from doing that again, so next time he actually brings a tree into her hospital room so that she has something living that she can sketch. As I read more graphic novels, I'm learning more about art style. At first glance, this graphic novel appears to be in black and white, but the ink color is actually gray, like a stormy ocean. The art style appears cartoonish, and yet the range of expressions that Yours Vermassen is able to capture is astonishing and only enhances the story and my experience with it. This graphic novel is a quick read, is therefore a great opportunity to slow down and to study the imagery and to consider what is death, what is love, what is art, and what is life.
And that's all the books we have for this week. Thank you for watching this week, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks for another new book review. And as always, make sure to check out these books.